This is the second video in a series on the underpainting process with a wipeout. As I said in the last video, we are going to be using two substances that we're going to mix with our paint. A oil of some sort, a linseed oil, and we're going to put together with liquid, which is a drying agent. And also it kind of thins things out. It's a petroleum-based product. When we put those two things together, we will have a long enough period to work with it that we can manipulate the paint like we want to, but it will also dry faster because of the liquid so that we can move on to the next stages. One of the biggest problems we have whenever we're working in layers is having to let each layer harden underneath. I don't like to use the word dry. I probably will interchangeably, but I want you to understand that it's not drying by evaporation like water does. It is hardening, and the hardening is accelerated by heat, but blowing a fan on it is not really going to give us any good results. And generally we want it to dry as slow as possible for the best look to the painting. But remember, this part of the painting is going to be underneath, so we're going to start by making our mixture. Now the mixture is going to be 50% liquid and 50% linseed oil, or 1 part to 1 part. We're going to add that to our paint. Mediums are very good because I want you to understand that oil paint is packaged primarily for sitting on the shelves for years. It is not made optimal in terms of how much oil is added and so forth. So we have to manipulate the paint to match our expectations, not shelf life and the number of years it can be sold. So that's what we are doing when we're adding these materials. We're making the paint just what we need it for our purpose. So liquid is the more expensive of the two, and I don't have as much. So when I'm mixing, I'm actually going to start with liquid as my first measure. It's going to move a little slowly, so we're going to let it run through it goes through very slowly. That's about all I'm going to do for right now. You can see it filling up down here. I take one of my little rags, put it up here to catch what's left as I'm finishing this. Want this to settle. Now I'm just going to mark where this one is, and I'm going to figure out how much linseed oil I need. Okay, so basically to go 50-50, I'm going to add that much linseed oil. I can go back to this now. And I'm going to try to fill it up to the level of my, just a little past, but I think I'm pretty good. Just overshot a bit. Putting the wrong top on the wrong thing there. Okay, this is all set. Put the top back on this. Now I have a little bit of a puppy damage on the end of this one, so I'm just going to cover it with my finger. You can just put the top on. I'm just going to begin by rocking it, letting it mix little by little. The liquid is much more viscous. This is a good lesson in the change of viscosity. You can see when something that's very viscous and something that is not as viscous, there's going to be separation. There's actually a way that we can use that to our advantage later in the painting, but for right now we just want to get this mixed up. I'm trying not to put a lot of bubbles into it. This liquid is a little older. Yours probably won't be quite this viscous. We're starting to get there. Yeah. Still a little bit in the bottom. Okay, that's pretty good. So this is going to be what we add to our paint. You can see we're just about now at just a little over our marks where I put a little more linseed oil. With this amount, that little bit of linseed oil is not going to make a big difference. So we're going to put these things away for now, our mediums, because we now have it in a separate bottle. This was my old bottle of it. It'll turn color with age, and I wanted to show you this, but that doesn't destroy it, okay? So don't throw it out if it's liquid. So now we need a burnt sienna paint, and you only want to paint what you can paint in a single session. And that's probably 3 to 4 hours of real good time for working the paint. So today we're going to just work on her face. We're going to bring the paint down with her hair, actually, which is up here. I didn't get some black on I should have had. So we do her hair and her face is all that we're going to be working on. So I'm going to make a little bit of an advanced judgment on how much burnt sienna I'm going to put out. Now, what's a little side note, burnt sienna is burnt sienna. It will be some more fiery, warm, others a little cooler and darker, but basically it works, except for one brand, and I'm not sure why, but Winton, which is the Winsor Newton student brand, falls apart when you try to do the process I'm going to show you. You literally cannot wipe in gradations. It goes from dark to nothing, and so please try to avoid the Winton brand. It's great for overpainting. There's no problem with it anywhere else, but for the wipeout process, it's the only one that I just cannot make work even after a long time. I think I gave you the wrong numbers last time. I actually learned this 32 years ago this month, so time goes really fast, but in all those years I've never been able to make Winton work for a student or for me. So the next process, I didn't talk to you about a palette knife. That's one of the things I should have said to have available. The palette knife is just for mixing. So you can use a popsicle stick as far as that goes. But what we want to do is make sure that the medium is fully mixed into our paint. Now, I like to break the paint surface down a little bit, coming out in the tube, get it kind of mixed up so I have a way to begin to mix in the paint, or the medium to the paint. So I drop this out. The paint has a slightly dull sense to it. You can see it's reflecting light, but not very brightly. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a few of these drops. I'm going to add about 3 the first time. And what we want to do is to make the whole thing shiny. You can see it's a little shinier. Not quite shiny enough. I'm going to add a couple more drops. Don't add this by great big globs. It'll become too runny, and it won't do what we want it to do. Now, again, there's a number of things you can do here when I'm teaching you to do this. Oftentimes, if you have a second palette knife, you can scrape the first one off. I'm going to be mixing all the way through here, and it's just one color, so I tend to leave it until I'm ready to clean the palette. This still needs to be a little shinier. Another 3 drops. Is it looking shinier? You see it's starting to get there. Now, one thing you always want to do is to show that it can still hold peaks like a meringue. So if it can hold a peak and not fall over, then and it's shiny, you've got the right consistency. If it's dull, you need to add more medium, of course. And if it's shiny but it won't hold a peak, you need to add more burnt sienna paint. Otherwise, it's just going to fall apart as I'm working with it. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm going to use my brush, which I'll be using here in a second, to just wipe some of this off, and it's a way to begin loading the brush. Now when I load the brush here, I'm going to make sure that I have plenty of this paint on. The next part's what shocks people. I've done this nice drawing, and I'm going to obliterate it. Sure, everything you want to cover is covered. I can go off into the black because I'm going to be able to wipe this off in a minute, and I want to have it completely covered. And you want to go as dark as you can possibly go at this time. Now, I have a lot of bright lights going on here on purpose because I'm going to want to be able to see through the paint to my drawing. And I want to keep it as dark as I can. Now you'll see by the photograph that I'm using as reference, which was taken by a friend of mine at my wedding. This is going to be not a real dark area, but we want this to be as dark as your darkest spot you're going to leave. The next thing I'm going to do is try to smooth this out. Now, why, when we're going to wipe on it, do we want to smooth it out? Well, it's because every one of these dark lines is just as dark as my drawing underneath, and if I don't smooth it out, I'm going to mistake the painted lines here as my drawn lines, and it's going to be very confusing. So I'm going to try to use a fan brush, a blender brush, to smooth this out. Now, what I want you to see, you're going to see it in real, actually, I think maybe I'm going to move my nylon one. Yeah, that's a little softer today. Now what you should be doing is just breaking down the brush strokes, not pushing. So as you're doing this, don't let the break happen in the brush. You want to keep it right on the edge like you're just feathering it in. It's a light area, so I'm going to, I'll be taking them all off in a minute. But I want you to see how easily it is, how easily we can take by not putting any pressure. I tell some students to just think of butterfly wings coming by, or to say, and this is the most popular, some people will just say to themselves or out loud, whisper, whisper, whisper as they do this. Now you have to keep cleaning the ends of the brush, otherwise you start just dragging like I was doing there. I'm at a raking angle right now, so it's kind of hard for me to see what you're seeing on the video. I'm trying to make sure that the normally speaking, we would finish with an upward stroke, but in this one I'm going to go along the light from our strong light behind my shoulder so that we have a little less glare and you can begin to see what's happening. Now eventually you should be able to make this completely flat if you need to do that. For the sake of your time, I'm going to actually now call this good. I'm going to go back one more time against so that I don't have glare. Trying to even this out a little bit. I'm going to do all the evening before you start wiping. Now I'm going to, so I don't forget, just wipe off the tips of my blending brush, my fan brush. And I'm now going to start to wipe. I want to make sure that I'm just doing the area that I want to do. I'm not going to do the earring today. So I can come back all the way around the black. I don't want that to dry on the black. I also don't care much about the hair because as you see, her hair is almost white. It won't be painted with white, but it'll be almost white. Now our goal is to, I'm going to just dug into that just a little bit, so I'm just going to fix that up. There we go. My idea is I need to go into her face, find my landmarks, and start wiping from the lightest areas. What we're going to do is go reverse. We're actually taking what's light on her face, like right below her upper lip. I'm going to start there. I'm going to come into the chin area. I'm going to come here. Keep moving your rag, otherwise you're going to just end up with a bunch of paint that you're putting back on. Now, when I get into a tight area here, I'm going to actually use this so I can show the eye the way it needs to be. Just a little bit of a I probably won't talk a lot during this, and you probably don't really need me to talk a lot as I wipe out here. But the main thing here, I'll try to keep attentive to, your needs as I'm going through. The main thing here is I'm looking for the highlighted areas and wiping them out. So I have this little darker area here I've noted. It's coming right down here. So I'm going to come back and work around that area. Keep smoothing these out. Move my finger, move my finger. The beauty of this technique is eventually it's going to begin to look, hopefully, if it's done right, like almost like magic. A face should start to emerge. You'll see me use my fingers to smooth this a lot. It just helps me see the value where we're at, and I can come back and so I just found this line, and I found this line, and this line. So I can begin to bring all these structures together and start to develop her nose and the area over her eye. Just want to keep track of where everything is. The bottom of her nose there, on the upper lip, as I said last time. It's quite clear that my upper lip was not strongly defined in my drawing. So as I do the wipeout, I'm going to have to keep moving back to find it. Now I keep going back and forth between the light and dark, looking carefully at what we're doing here. So this takes a little time, and rather than trying to hold your attention through all of it, I think what I'm going to do is take this a little farther on, and we'll do a little time-lapse video on it, and then we will come back to you with a fourth video after the time-lapse where I explain and show you the details and how to get the details ready on the face.